Unspoken Issues.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Unspoken Issues, Unspoken Epics. This time revolving around a character that, I'll gladly say I'm been kind of ignorant about. Unfortunately, I'll own up to it. But this character's been around since the 90s, and that's what we're here to talk about. That character is Anarky. So we've got a few stories we're going to be talking about this evening that revolve around that character. And of course, I'm not alone. By all means, Dean Compton is right there. Dean, are you ready to talk some... Wait a second. Why am I even asking this question? Are you even ready to talk anarchy, sir?
I already spent about 37% of my life discussing anarchy and anarchism in its various forms. So absolutely, I'm very ready. Readers at the UnspokenDecade.com, I've mentioned this in several of my articles, and also over at longboxgraveyard.com. That I am an unabashed libertarian socialist. I'm an anarchist. I would lean towards anarcho-syndicalism. So it's gonna be really weird. We're gonna get some like great comic book superhero DC universe action. Everywhere, everything from Kirby's creation, the demon, to Kirby's creation, dark side. And we're also probably going to learn a lot more about the Spanish Civil War than anyone would have ever thought in regard to a comic book podcast. And I'm happy to fill this role. It's very interesting to, you said something, you're like, I've been very ignorant all my life about anarchy. Well, buddy, you and a lot of other people in regard to what this actually means as a political philosophy. It's very interesting to see it personified here, and I'm going to have a ball talking to y'all about some of this, but feel free to cut me off if I get high-winded or if, I use a fire truck ladder to get up on a high horse.
There was one point where Dean come to me and he said, hey, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to, produce while I'm down here at Dragon Con. You remember that, Dean? Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, you did it a couple years. You did a great job.
I appreciate
Everybody.
That's not what I came. That's not what I'm looking for.
You know what? You deserve the praise. But yeah, it was a great time.
The story is when you ran into somebody you were interviewing. It was the first time I'd ever heard of something called a red card. And is that okay? All right. So you're talking to this guy and you guys hit it off immediately because he mentions something about it. And you both are carrying these red cards. I have no idea what that is until I did my research on the internet. But anyway.
Right. Yeah. Red card it's the card that members of the industrial workers of the world carry. We're known as Wobblies. I am a red card member. I keep my dues up to date. My union is not recognized where I currently work, but I am still a member of it, and it is an anarcho-syndicalist union in practice. They don't as a body, you don't like to label yourself so much, but in practice, it is governed by a direct democracy. And it actually, with all the talk about Starbucks unionization recently, the IWW started trying to unionize Starbucks in approximately 2001, 2002.
Oh, really?
So, this is something, and this doesn't get done without those efforts 20 years ago. The IWW was tremendously powerful in the early 1900s. Big Bill Haywood was associated with it. I think Emma Goldberg and Alexander Berkman, some, very well-known anarchist theorists, they were associated with it. But it was a very good union, very direct action oriented. That's a term you're going to hear a lot here today, too. But yeah, I was a red card member. He was, he carried a red card. He had his red card. And we're both wobbly. So you would instantly talk about it because it's a special bond. That's
pretty cool.
Anarchists have been persecuted historically. So when you run into one and, when you're open about it like that, and I'm unabashedly open for somebody who is involved in mainstream society, for lack of a better word, in regard to these political beliefs. And you run into somebody, you have that special bond instantly. So yeah, I'm glad you picked up on that. Instantly, me and that guy were hey, let's go to war because we might.
Yeah. Absolutely want to bring on Darry. Wait, Darry, you've been sitting there quiet, man. You're ready to talk some anarchy, buddy.
I'm ready to listen. I'll say that. I never read these books before. I had no experience with the character. These issues were a trip. They really were. And I fell down quite the rabbit hole of the philosophy that inspired Alan Grant, the writer, to come up with this guy. And I have no idea what the character stands for at this point. So I'm hoping that a little light can be shed on that, if nothing else.
So Lonnie Machin is Anarky. He's a very young man, 15 years old, and he is a super genius kid, and he has basically all of the advantages that somebody of, let's say, an upper middle class upbringing would have, in addition to being a super genius. His parents are together. He's very well taken care of. He's the system is working for him, and he has a pen pal at one point named Xerxes, who is in an African nation, and one day they're not pen pals anymore. And later on, he learns that, due to political upheaval in that nation between what we can assume is United States right-wing authoritarian backed government, and a Marxist guerrilla uprising, his family has been uprooted. His dad's gone, probably dead. His mom is, sick. He's been put out on the street, probably going to be conscripted into some kind of child army if he doesn't just die. And Lonnie is aghast at this, as everyone should be. But like when he says, hey, what are we going to do about it? His dad is pretty much like, nothing. We're not going to do anything about it.
Right.
What can we do? It's another country. A lot of people, when we talk about anarchism, when they were young, they thought countries were stupid. And Lonnie was no different. But the difference is when he went to start doing research on this, he dove into the political writings of prominent anarchist thinkers like Proudhon, Mikhail Bakunin, Peter Kropotkin, Nestor Makhno, Emma Goldman, von Train de Cleyre, Alexander Berkman, etc. And that led him to, come to the belief, much like me, that all authoritarian hierarchies have to be dismantled. And that includes the state, that includes religious hierarchies, that includes anything that allows people to have dominion over another person without an incredible burden of proof. Like, yeah, if a 4-year-old's going to run into the street, you obviously have the authority to keep the 4-year-olds from running into the street for their own safety. They can't really make decisions. On the other hand, we should not allow ourselves to be so imprisoned by things like class, by things like borders. These are things that we've invented, and they can be uninvented and probably should to increase the scope of human freedom. Lonnie came to believe that, but he lives in the DC universe. So if there's a problem in the DC universe, like if you're an orphan from another planet, or gangsters kill your family, or like a lightning strikes you and some chemicals, you probably have to put on a costume and do something about it.
Right.
And so he does. He becomes Anarky. He considers himself the voice of the people. He's a super genius. He's able to create his own weapons. He can manipulate computer systems so that he is endlessly financed. But he essentially becomes a Batman foil because he wants to undo the entire system, because all of the things that are bad about Gotham's corruption, Gotham's malfeasance, those are symptoms. The system is the disease. Batman digs the system, which is stupid. The system did nothing but fail him growing up. I mean, right. I guess he's rich, but his parents got murdered and stuff. But he's very into order. I guess his PTSD wants him to create order, and he can't handle that. And in my opinion, this is one of those times where, Batman's just unequivocally wrong. There's no doubt that Two-Face and the Joker, the Riddler, they're murderers and they're terrible. But Anarchy's like, listen, your system's bad. And if it's so great, why are there so many homeless people? Right. If it's so great, why is there so much corruption? If it's so great, why do we produce enough food to eat for everybody to eat? That's a statistical fact. But so many people die of hunger. Why is it that why do we constantly sell arms to each other? Your system's so great. Why do all these terrible things keep happening? And Batman can't solve that with a well-placed batarang or a fist.
That's right.
So the character of Anarky, for those of you who don't have the issue sitting in front of you, he looks like the character of V from V for Vendetta. And he was created not too long after the original comic book series finished its run in America. That character is an anarchist. That character is exactly what Dean is describing. Alan Moore probably agrees with Dean on 99% of this stuff. But as the character of Anarky evolves, and as Alan Grant, a British writer, as his opinion on politics evolves, the character becomes more of an objectivist, which is more of a right-wing philosophy, which is very pronounced with Steve Ditko and The Question and Mr. A, and then looping this back to Alan Moore, most famously with Rorschach. So I just became very confused, but it was very interesting because I love seeing a writer who's good at this. Again, we should give a little background. Alan Grant was a prominent Batman writer. I mean, he created Ratcatcher, the ventriloquist. He created a wealth of characters in the late 80s and early 90s. This was a guy who was doing the work very well. Anarky,
and one of the best Judge Dredd guys of all time too.
Yeah,
right.
And he did Lobo and the Demon. He had his fingers over a lot of not necessarily mature readers comics, but definitely stuff on that edge.
Yeah, this was not like he showed up at DC, he did one character and he left. Like his presence is still felt. Like he created a Mr. Zaz, who I feel like has been in more adaptations than anyone but the Joker. Like he was good at this. He was really good at this. But this character is clearly what Grant Morrison would call a fiction suit, where it's like he gets to espouse what the writer believes. And it was very interesting to see that evolve really to two different ends of the spectrum that ultimately have more overlap than you'd think. So I really enjoyed this as one novel that Batman just happened to show up in. But again, like I said, just a roller coaster for me.
Yeah, and he does go more towards, what sadly we would call right-wing anarchism, which in the anarchist schools of thought, just that's probably going to be a lot of my role here. That's very controversial. Nobody, like 98% of anarchists do not think that objectivism is anarchist, because one of the things that you have to take care of is people's needs have to be met, and it doesn't really matter in regard to how important yourself is. Yourself is important. The collective is important. Sometimes they will be oppositional, but neither one is really more important than the other. You have to be yourself within that collective so that the best good, comes to both, because ultimately what's best for everybody tends to be what's best for individuals. Objectivists, right-wing anarchists, anarcho-capitalists, and I would call Batman an anarcho-fascist, and have done so before several times. They think that like the individual thing is very, very important. This is not to be confused with individual anarchism, its own thing. We won't get into that. But they think that like society really exists so that individuals can like super triumph, and like rich people deserve what they get, etc. You can like, they basically want, they want capitalism without a state. Mm-hmm. And as much as I detest the state is one of the only apparatuses that can deal with unfettered capitalism, which is worse. And it's weird, my headcanon, anarchy stays a lefty. You can extrapolate that stuff as it goes on, but it is important for me to note that the ideals and the ideology that he espouses as Grant changes his own personal ideology, they're not necessarily considered anarchism within most schools of anarchist thought.
Okay. Were you a young kid picking these issues up and going, holy shit, look at this? Or was this something you found later in life and were like, okay, well, this is a neat character. Tell me about it.
Well, actually, I bought the Anarky miniseries off the rack. I think it came out in 98. And that was when I'd first gone to college. When I was a young man, as funny as this is, when I was a young man, I was like highly conservative. I was like super, super right wing, and like I became a right-wing libertarian. When I was very young, I was like a very religious Christian fundamentalist right-winger. Like, I was like, we should outlaw premarital sex. Like, what the fuck, dude? Like, how are you going to enforce? Why? And how are you going to enforce it? These are things I thought. It's probably because I wasn't getting laid. Let's be honest. Like I'm 14 years old. I'm not. Nobody wants to smooch on old Dean. Nobody should smooch. That's probably what it was. Probably some of that involved. But around 16 or 17, I became like a right-wing libertarian, which is not too far from the neo-tech objectivist stuff on the political spectrum. And that's when I picked up the Anarky miniseries. But I was always like a little different. Like, I grew up very working class, so that would temper some of my stuff. Like, even then I thought there should be like nationalized healthcare and shit. And then in 99 or 2000, when I went to UACCB, I took sociology, and like that was the first time I'd ever actually read Marx and not just like heard about what Marx said. And Marx's conflict theory, which is one of the big three like theories of sociology, which is basically there are haves and there are have-nots, and the have-nots have to fight the haves for everything the have-nots can get. And the haves will always try and keep as much as they can from the have-nots. Well, growing up poor, working class, I was like, well, God damn it, that's it. Like, that's where it is. And from there, I began to become a left-wing anarchist. And then as a left-wing anarchist, it's very interesting to go back and read these issues, because as much as superheroes get a lot of flack for being a very right-wing ideology, a very right-wing inspired, and I don't necessarily disagree, it's important to remember that most of these superheroes were invented by decidedly anti-fascist Jewish kids. A lot of the tenets of anti-fascism can actually be found here. Voluntary association. Wolverine can be in as many groups as he wants. He can leave one whenever he wants. He can be as many at the same time as he can be. Mutual aid, these groups help each other, etc. So I think that, do-it-yourself ethos, you take care of things yourself. Certainly there winds up with fascistic overtones. I'm not an idiot. But I also do think that we focus too much on those as opposed to the left-wing parts of superheroes. And that's why I got into this later when I got more into this politics. I look back and I was like, wow, it's very interesting that this got out at all.
I hate when people say that the superhero is a fundamentally fascist concept. I hate it.
It's just not true.
No, I don't think it's true at all.
It is if you want it to be. It is if you want it to be.
I'm a huge fan of the Golden Age Superman. And if you want a more socially conscious man of the people character who, again, started the entire genre, you go back and you read the first couple of years of Superman stories before World War II starts by Jerry Siegel, and you are going to find this. Again, Morrison called him a socialist super defender, a fireman in a cape. Like
he's beating up scabs.
Yeah, like
he's going to like Central America and overthrowing banana republics that are obviously propped up by the United States. Like it's wild. It's wild. Then later on, like the image we have, Superman with the big flag, which you see later, but early on, like you're saying, Darry, that motherfucker was a muckraker.
He really was. Like Golden Age Superman, I always say the story I wish we had was Golden Age Superman being around for Lex being president, because whereas we had all powerful Superman kind of just moping, Golden Age Superman would have just thrown him into the Potomac.
Right.
Like,
that's exactly what he would have done. Captain America would have just gone and punched him in the face.
Oh, like Cap would have quit and formed the resistance.
What are we messing around with? Like, what are you talking about? Because you look at these guys, what did Jack Kirby say? He goes, I didn't know much of anything about politics, except that if I heard that somebody liked Hitler, I'd go beat the crap out of him.
Right.
And at the end of the day, that's sort of what anarchism is at its base. Is like you just hate anybody who's going to take away that much freedom, and that's a very left-wing ideology, and all these guys who created this stuff are very left-wing. That's why they were ripped off by the very right-wing corporatists that took all this stuff from them.
There you go.
Well,
soapbox.
Keep it there. I'm sure you'll need it here in a few.
I don't know if y'all will, but I'm definitely going to step back on it.
Let's start with Robin Annual #1. This hits shelves July of 1992. Darry, do your best to kind of give me an idea of what happened in here. Our creative team, Alan Grant writing this, Tom Lyles penciling, I believe. At least that's what they have it listed here on Mike's Amazing World of Comics. I remember him from some Spider-Man comics, if I remember right. That synopsis is coming up, but first let me talk about Amazon Music. If you're looking for a good platform that can fill those musical needs, Amazon Music has you covered. If you head to getamazonmusic.com/W2M Network, you can get a free 30-day trial where you can check out over 70 million songs. That's getamazonmusic.com/W2M Network for that free 30-day trial.
Yeah, so this is from the period of time where Tim Drake is the third Robin. He has his own book. He's having his own adventures. DC was selling you Batman.
He actually doesn't have his own book. He's still in a series of miniseries stage. He has an annual,
really?
No ongoing. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't mean to be an asshole and correct you.
No,
No.
To me,
I am not a DC expert, so you step in when you need to. I have no idea what we're talking about half the time with this stuff.
Yeah, this came out Robin 3, the miniseries Robin with the lenticular covers.
Okay.
It would come out a couple months after this, yeah. So it's weird to me that he got an annual with no ongoing.
Well, it's a crossover, right? It's
right,
it's the Eclipso. It's the same
like
thing.
30 parts. Like it's like, hey, we don't have enough here for this Eclipso. Let's get a Robin annual going.
This annual, it's pretty standard fare. Anarky has a plot, and Robin, who again is also 15 years old, needs to stop him. And I got to be honest with you, a lot happens, but not a lot stuck with me. Like Dean alluded to this before, but I am not a huge Tim Drake fan. Actually, something that Dean had told me that I didn't realize was that Alan Grant, who again, I don't know if I'm the only person picturing Sam Neill from Jurassic Park when I say Alan Grant out loud, but the writer Alan Grant, Batman's Alan Grant, could not look less like that. But apparently,
Alan Grant.
Yeah, exactly. Apparently, Anarky was being pitched as a potential third Robin, because this is in the period of time where Jason Todd got voted to death or whatever, and Tim wasn't quite established. And I'm flipping through this issue again, and all I can think of is how great would it have been to begin the 90s with Lonnie, with Anarky as Robin, because then, to Dean's point, the conflict with Batman would have been amazing. Like, Tim, if you like him, that's fine. I'm not saying it's bad.
And I do. I'm a Tim Drake fan.
Awesome. Most of my friends are. I don't know. It never clicked with me. And one of the big things with this was like, there's just no conflict there. It's like, he's a very even-keeled character. But if you'd put Anarky, if you'd put an anarchist, you'd have the Damien relationship from the 2010s, like 30 years earlier, and you'd have this idea of like, well, this is a Robin who doesn't believe in your mission, but he believes in you. Can you win him over? So I'm flipping through these pages and I'm thinking, oh man, I wish they had let Grant just make him Robin. Like, that would have been a great story of like, why are we fixing this system if this system is broken? And I just feel like that would have helped Robin become a little bit more interesting in the 90s. Because again, I should have picked this up on the stands, but I was just like, I saw Robin, I saw Batman, my brain turned off. I just wasn't interested.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you look at the back of the Batman Anarchy trade paperback, which has most of the issues in that we're talking about today, not the Eclipso annual, but like it says, the quest for justice in Gotham City is no longer a fight between good and evil. It is now a war over who's right and who's wrong. Batman, Anarky, two dedicated idealists, two champions for very different ideas. If Anarky wins, what will Gotham stand to gain? If Batman wins, what will Gotham lose? Because that's the real thing. It's like you're saying, Darry, there's a real conflict there. And for me, Anarchy's right. Like, Anarky is fundamentally correct. Other people will say Batman is, but there's something to argue about because there's something to like about both these guys. It would have been a better Robin. That's what all that was for. I was back in your play.
I think it's interesting, too, because it's also a matter of scale. Like, Batman is 25, 30 years old. He's old money. He was trained by the best people in the world. He's very committed to a very specific goal, which is, prevent random acts of violence from ruining a person's life like it ruined him. And that has unfolded in the way of him deciding to have a war on crime in the largest city in the country. And that's fine. But to your point, it's like Batman doesn't really work outside of Gotham unless he has to save Superman or something else. Right. But Anarky is younger. Anarky, he's in high school. He's brilliant. He believes in the internet. Again, this is the early 90s. The internet was not really a thing back then.
News groups, baby.
Yeah. But he's like constantly
No, he's on it.
Yeah. So I just think it's funny because Anarky's like your typical teenager, and he's like, no, man, I figured out money and technology and everything else. You guys just weren't trying hard enough. I'm going to fix the entire world. And it's when those two sets of expectations crunch into each other that Batman is almost saying like, well, dude, you're not wrong, but you are not going to fix the entire world alone, and you're hurting people in the small scale. So again, it produces this very interesting story because, to your point, Anarky passes the antagonist test, which is you can almost see where he's coming from. And I feel like most people don't even get that far, but Anarky checks that box.
Right.
Another thing that he can do, like if he was Robin and knew that Batman was Bruce Wayne, is, yes, Batman focuses a lot on, specific acts of violence, street crime, insane clowns that aren't a posse. But like, he gives a bunch of money as Bruce Wayne to various charities and various causes, and that's great. And he thinks that's doing something. And Anarky would be like, if that's helping, why is all this shit the same? Why do you have a mugger to beat up every night? You give all this money. Where's this money going? What's happening with this money? Because there's a whole like NGO industrial complex that it's probably getting sucked up into. Listen, I'm not saying that it's fictional money too, but in the real world, when billionaires just say, I'm going to throw money at something to solve the problem, it's nice when they do, but the mechanisms through which they do it are usually ineffective and the money gets sucked up. It would be better of them to just give $1 billion in cash straight to people, honestly, and I think that he would say that. He's like, if all this stuff you're doing on the street isn't helping and all this stuff you're doing as Bruce Wayne isn't helping, what the fuck are you doing, old man?
Right.
And you could argue he's not wrong. I mean, you can really, again, I don't think Batman's evil or necessarily wrong, but he's not doing it right, or these problems would dissipate. Also, it's Gotham City, it's fake, so I get that too. Nobody comment like, well, it's fake, man. Two-Face is going to come back. I know that, but we're talking about
this comic book podcast to tell us it's fake.
Right. I don't need you to tell me Anarchy's fake, because if he was real, he'd fucking be me.
I have to ask, because I was going through the annual here, and I know that the first appearance of Anarky, I believe, was 1989. I can't remember.
That's correct. It's
Okay.
an issue of can't remember what issue of Detective Comics. I want to but it was an issue of Detective Comics. I have it, believe it or not.
So the design of Anarky in this book, and tell me again, not familiar with the character, but he has this like huge neck. So we're obviously not to assume that is the way this guy is built, obviously, but they do not take his mask off in here, I don't believe, and at least in this annual. I know we get it later on.
No, but you've seen him without it prior to the annual. He's made appearances. Like, he does that so that, like, you think you don't know he's a kid.
So I assume that he has like this huge, like, large apparatus that goes over his head.
It's a comic book costume.
All right. I don't mean to be an asshole, but like, no, I'm fine with it. I just think it's
neck, and it fools people into thinking he's an adult. Not Batman, the world's greatest detective, but other people get fooled into thinking he's an adult. It's camouflage for him. It's probably not actually applicable with any real world technology.
Like Batman,
but we let Iron Man have the suit.
That's fine.
You know, so in the DC universe, it's Booster Gold and the Rocket Reds. I'm going to give Anarky the giraffe neck. I'm going to let him have it. Of course, he's a favorite of mine, so I'll probably let him have it.
All right. Well, I noticed some of the pictures you were posting, and where he's kind of like sitting there and like some smoke is going around his elongated neck, and I'm like, certainly this is a stylistic choice in regards to the artist. Which no. I don't think so.
I mean, it is too, because like Darry said, this is a tribute to V for Vendetta, who had that big look.
Okay.
But then they explained it away as well, because how could this like 4 or 14-year-old be in here?
Yeah.
Again, I think we mentioned a few times, but this was a crossover as part of the Eclipso story, and Eclipso is he's one of these vague DC characters who's fought 100 different people over decades, and I couldn't tell you what he wants or why he wants it, but he's there and he's got some.
He's like the Spectre before the Spectre.
See, there we go.
Okay.
He could have changed now, but when I was last keeping up with DC Universe, that's basically what Eclipso was. He's the god of vengeance at this point, because he is like the vengeance of God. He was too evil to be the wrath of God. So you blew that one, Jehovah.
But it is interesting to put these characters into a crossover like that, because the gimmick of the crossover is, well, if you're really angry about something, there's now a god on Earth who's going to give you power to do something about it. And I did think that was interesting, because Tim Drake and Anarky Lonnie, they are opposites, even though they run in the same circles and they're of similar age. And again, they're both brilliant. I mean, Tim Drake became Robin because he cracked the secret identity very easily. Like, right. These guys are if not equals, they're good foils for each other. They're really good antagonists. But one of the things I liked here is once you have the Black Diamond MacGuffin in play, which is how Eclipso manifests on Earth, you kind of get this idea of them saying, well, we should use empathy. It's like, oh no, we should free everyone from this. And it's like, okay, but if you give someone the power to deal with their problems, they're going to become violent. And it was kind of interesting to see that play out, because to Dean's point, it's like, well, it's the DC universe, so everything gets this physical manifestation.
Mm-hmm.
And,
right.
I thought it was a good crossover for Eclipso, but it does kind of hint about what is to come, which is Alan Moore once said that his comic Promethea was a superhero comic that ended up as a philosophy lecture. Anarky is the same way. Anarky is absolutely a superhero comic, but it often becomes a sociological lecture, which is fine because it's incredibly informative, but it's different because most comics don't do that. And this kind of hints at that, where it's like, oh yeah, Anarky is doing a lot of monologuing. So it was just interesting, because Tim is swinging around trying to save people and save his friends, and there's a B plot with a bunch of kids going
balls,
to the fair.
like
exactly.
Basketball, and like just shooting like he's in a Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, McDonald's commercial circa 1991.
Heck yeah. It's a product of its time. It really is. But no, it's good for what it is, which is like the two characters have to interact in the Eclipso crossover. They do it very well, and you both see what they would do with phenomenal cosmic power. So I enjoyed it. And yeah, you mentioned before Tom Lyle. No disrespect meant to Norm Brayfogle, who drew most of this stuff, but I'm a huge Tom Lyle fan. So as soon as I realized this was him, I hunted it down, and this was comfort food to start me off on the Anarky journey.
The Eclipso crossover was just starting when I first got into comic books. I actually remember seeing this issue on the shelves the first time I went to a comic book store. I didn't buy it. You know, it's like $2.95, which like it would have been like $100 to me.
Yeah, dude.
$2.92. You know, I mean, like I don't know about that. You get a couple $1.25 ones over here, cheap as fuck. I enjoyed it. I think it was a really cool little part of the Eclipso crossover. But if this didn't happen, the crossover wouldn't have suffered. None of these characters would have suffered. There's almost no consequence in it, which is fine. Mostly what's funny is just Tim Drake is just an asshole. Like, he is just like a piece of shit like the whole time. And I like Tim Drake. But I think the thing that works is when he's a smarty pants, know-it-all, shoving it in people's faces when they're adults. It's cool because like I was 14, the same age as him. I'm like, yeah, you tell them. Like I was part of a team that beat the teachers in the quiz bowl. That meant I was smarter than them. Like Tim Drake was smarter than all those guys, right?
Nice.
Not what it meant. But it did, you know, but like I got off on that kind of thing at the time. But when you look at him like trying to chastise like Anarky for being a kid, hey, fuck you, bro, you're a kid.
Yeah,
like you can't like that's weird to me that like that they would categorize it like that. Although Robin does usually have a holier than thou kind of attitude. Like I said, it works more when he's around adults, but much better than when he's around kids. This is one of the things where like Anarky in a lot of ways, he's too smart for his own good. He's always trying, and this is kind of a theme throughout the issues we read. He's like, listen, I'll somehow use this system against itself, or I'll use something that's bad for a good purpose and it will work. There are a lot of anarchists that think that to an extent, like, and sometimes that's true. Like, you know, some anarchists are like, I have a couple Christian anarchist pals who won't do any violence, but most anarchists are like, violence is acceptable in certain situations. Usually when you're attacked, it's the only thing, that can work. But he constantly like thinks that like somehow he will outsmart like the Black Diamond. He will later on, he'll try and outsmart like the Demon and Dark Side and Powers of Hell. And that shows that like he is very inexperienced, not just as an anarchist, but also as a young man. As a young man, you would think that you could outsmart a lot more of those things than you can. So I thought that was neat, where he's like, oh, I'll get myself possessed, but then I'll just have a solar flare go off because that's how you get rid of Eclipso. That's not always going to work. How are you going to outsmart this god, Lonnie? He won't stop trying, bless his heart. But I do like how that's a really big glimpse into like what will be, sort of an overarching theme of the character, in that like in our world, he's challenging things that can be challenged because like if you don't think that God exists or, Allah exists or whatever, they're not going to send their avatar to like slice you open with the sword of judgment. This is the DC fucking universe, baby. You don't think demons exist? Too bad. You don't think that like Darkseid exists? Too bad. You don't think that Eclipso can overcome your, intellect no matter how smart you are? Too bad. And I think that's interesting to see these philosophies tested. I think very real world and very important and smart real world philosophies tested in a fantastical world. And I think this Robin annual is the first time where we kind of see that, and we see Lonnie start to think that he will outsmart that kind of those fantastical characters and elements of the DC universe.
All right. So yeah, we're fast forwarding to 1995, where we are going to be looking at Batman Chronicles #1. So this hits the shelves May 30th, 1995. Okay, so this is like right at the end. And these issues that we're about to cover actually happen really close to each other, because the next issue I think we're going to talk about the Shadow of the Bat issues, and those went on sale May 16th of 95. That was issue 40. And then I think maybe it was a month later. I didn't write it down here, but yeah, I think it was June. Here we go. All right, Anarky, Tomorrow Belongs to Us. All right. Alan Grant, the writer, Stuart Johnson penciling, Cam Smith inking, Phil Allen on the colors, and Bill Oakley lettering here. And this is a very, very, like I said, short paragraph here. A young Lonnie Machin sits in juvie, surrounded by young listeners, as he explains how power corrupts and our societal system only benefits a small minority. Meanwhile, Anarky is going about the town, gathering intel on a wealthy politician. We soon find out that Lonnie is broadcasting himself as a hologram as he's going about Gotham here, or wherever he's at. And he switched the billboard slogan for the politician he was looking into to read, "Power corrupts, don't vote." And that's pretty much where we end the story. I mean, there is definitely some good philosophy discussion that happens in this book. As, Lonnie's just kind of sitting around with his friends in juvie, and he's kind of explaining, hey, this is the way things should be, and this is the way things are. One of the things that I picked up on here, and then I'm going to turn it loose to you guys because I feel like I had a couple of things that I grabbed from this small story that we got. We talked about the dynamic between Batman's actions/beliefs and Anarky's actions/beliefs. Batman's misguided as he fights the result of crime, but not the causes. Batman's laser focused on taking care of criminals after they've done the deed.
I think it's very similar to the current way our police forces are set up. And it's interesting when you hear people be like, oh, defund the police is bad. We should get more cops. But if there's more crime, they'll just pay for more cops. But didn't more cops, why didn't it fix more crime last time? The issue of crime is incredibly simple. Like, it almost all comes back down to poverty. You'll never eliminate all crime, certain crimes of passion, sadly, etc. I'm not saying that somebody who, in a fit of rage murders their best friend is just, oh, well, who cares? That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying there's not a lot that you can do about that as a society. On the other hand, a lot of addiction issues, a lot of petty theft issues, a lot of what we consider like property crime, vandalism, etc. If you created a social safety net that didn't have poverty, you would eradicate like 95% of those crimes. And those crimes make up a ton. And we can put crimes in like quotes for a lot of this stuff. Like, most people in the federal prison system are in there for some kind of drug crime, a nonviolent drug crime, whether it's possessing a large amount or selling it. Is that a crime? Well, it makes a lot of people a lot of money. Batman goes and beats up people who are mugging ladies and taking their purses. No one should mug people and take purses, but in order to keep that from happening, you can't just spend a bunch of money on prisons. You can't build a prison industrial complex like we have. We have to attack the symptoms. What situation in life drove this guy to do that? Because as a general rule, people like to do the right thing. And so I think that's what he was talking about. And it's really funny that he puts that power corrupts, don't vote up. Yeah. One of the oldest anarchist-like things when it comes to elections, because most anarchists boycott most elections because it's participating in it's a state-ran scam to most of us, most of the time. You're going to choose between two rich guys. I think things are changing now because of the radical ascent into fascism by one of our parties. I won't say which, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. I think that may be changing now to where you morally probably should go one way. But as a general rule, it's a bureaucratic rich guy versus a bureaucratic rich guy. Sometimes it's a lady. Sometimes they're of a different minority. But class is almost always a unifying factor. So you don't vote. And one of the things you used to say is you should vote for? Nobody. You know why? Because nobody will solve your problem. Nobody cares about you. Nobody is going to take care of your needs. Nobody will keep rich people from encroaching more onto your society. So you should vote for nobody. That's, I think it's a very fair point. This is a really fun little issue to me. Batman Chronicles, a fifth week book, I believe. It was quarterly because there was a week where this is when Batman came out once a week. You had Detective, Shadow, Batman, and Legends of the Dark Knight. Mm-hmm. And so this would fill in the fifth week, a big quarterly book. Really good way to get Anarky over, in my opinion. Really cool to see him work with the homeless guy in the issue. Legs, as he'll turn out to be called. And I like him trying to reach out to the kids because that's part of the political process as you try and talk to people about this stuff. Probably won't see significant change in your lifetime, but I know from just talking to you two and talking to other friends of mine, people will never think the same thing about this after they have 3 conversations with me. Whether you agree or disagree, you're going to think about something. Definitely
the driving force behind Anarky as a character is to get at least that bit of conversation going.
He was actually made to proselytize for it, but sadly, the left-wing anarchist group Alan Grant was demonized him for it for holier than thou reasons. It was a really bad move on their part. I believe he was part of the British Anarchist Party at the time. And, they were like, oh, you're perverting the ideas and giving it to a corporation. That's not what he was doing at all. But those people probably never read a comic book. And sadly, believe it or not, anarchists aren't perfect and they commit human errors. And I believe this was a litany of them in regard to their treatment of Alan Grant. And that's a huge reason why he goes objectivist and why Anarky does.
Darry, what do you think, man? This short story, it comes out here. What are your thoughts?
I love the gimmick. I love any story that's got a little twist in the middle, and the idea that Anarky is committing this act of political, subterfuge, for lack of a better word, but he's also preaching to the people in juvie. Again, kids we've put in prison for presumably nonviolent crimes. I don't know all the details here. And then the reveal at the end, because it's Gotham, that's a holographic holographic projector. And I just thought that was so great because that really distinguishes Anarky as a character. It's like, well, what's the victory here? It's like, well, I'm going to ruin this politician's bad day. No, that's just like why he gets up in the morning. His goal is to make these kids think along different lines. And that's exactly what Dean is saying, which is this character's point isn't to bring down Batman or to murder the Robin or to do any of that nonsense. It's to make you, the reader, look at this a different way. That's the point. It's a little over the top at times, but that's the point. Just like with V for Vendetta, like you are going through the same arc as Evie is. And I thought that this was a great exploration of that because it's not violent. No one gets punched. The Joker doesn't murder a bunch of babies. Like it's an ideological story.
Even one.
Not even one. Not even a single one.
Joker
Yeah, I thought it was a great use of 8 pages. This is what I was saying before. Like, Alan Grant is not one of these guys who just showed up, said a bunch of nonsense, and disappeared. He's good at this. He's good at comics. And I thought this was a really good example of whether or not you agree with this character, you at least get to see his point of view while he's also doing something. He's not just, Bendis talking at you for 8 pages. So
Right.
I really enjoyed this story. I thought it was good. Again, I'm not 100% sold on the character, but this story pulled me in and made me want to read the next one, which I think is...
Yeah, and I think also you can tell Alan Grant cut his teeth on stories for 2000 AD because that's all that's an anthology book. It comes out weekly. He's probably, I can't say, but he's probably able to do 2 or 3 8-pagers a week to break into the business. So this 8-pager is it's tight. There's nothing wasted, gets everything across. If you read the Robin Annual, and we're going to read the next stuff, and we're going to read the mini, they're always we're going to send you to Junior, to Juvie, Lonnie. He doesn't give a fuck. He can leave. It doesn't matter. He can leave anytime he wants.
Right.
Anytime. It's one of those situations where, and this is one of my favorite tropes, where the prisoner is not really the prisoner, and he just stays in prison because he feels like it. And he's probably staying in prison because he has a very captive audience for his philosophy, and a receptive one. Who better to get converted? You can talk to somebody like he wrote Soledad, brother. His last name's Jackson. I can't remember his first name off the top of my head. But he was a black anarchist in prison, and he talked a lot to other prisoners. They killed him, because that's what they do. But he talked to a lot to other prisoners about leftist philosophies and anarchism. And they're in a condition to listen because most of them probably got screwed over by the fucking state or society at some point.
Right.
And most of them are very willing to engage in ideas that are helpful to them, and engage in ideas that treat them as people. And all of these things are true of most hard left philosophies, and especially left-wing anarchism. So I think this was great. I think it was really good. It's really interesting that you pointed out that they came out close together, because obviously this is a thing to try and get you. You're supposed to read this and be like, oh, can't wait for Shadow of the Bat.
One of my favorite moments in this small story is when the guard shows up, and he's like, you kids need to get to bed. What are you doing? And he's really mad. He's like, you guys are breaking the rules. You need to be disciplined. And what a better way to really nail down a child coming into their own than asking the question, why? Why? Who made
As
the
parents,
rules?
I'm sure y'all are like,
yeah. I know. I do. I know that I have plenty of times. I feel like the guard here sometimes. I'm the guy.
I think you're a little better than the guard, Jesse.
Well, I'm definitely not as strict as this dude is, but there's some times where I'm
Your kid does have to be asleep at 3, though, right?
Just in their bedrooms, all I care about. As long as they're in the bedroom, they can stay up and do whatever. Just go be in your bedroom. That's the whole point, I think, or at least that's what I got out of this, is the rules are there, but who makes the rules and why do we have to follow them?
Yeah,
so,
and who are these rules really for?
Right.
Who do these rules benefit? It's not benefiting me. And that doesn't mean, again, I think a lot of people misconceptualize, anarchy means you don't think there should be any rules or no authority. That's not it. It just means that if there are rules, there are authorities, they have to justify this to an incredible degree. They have to really it has to be really made clear, we have to do this. And if they can't, then they shouldn't exist. That's how we increase the scope of human freedom. That's how we've always done it. From the invention of agriculture to the invention of atomic science. I want to do it, and anarchy wants to do it in more of a socio-political, sociological realm. But that ties into the sciences too. I'm not going to go off on that tangent, but like I just think that's natural. Darry doesn't. He's a crypto fascist. I'm just teasing, guys.
Crypto. Well, if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and we'll move on to our next couple of stories here. This is out of Shadow of the Bat, number 40 and number 41. So these, like I said, May 16th, 1995, Shadow of the Bat number 40 is on the shelves. The first story is called Prophet of Doom, which is part 1. Part 2 is The Anarchist Manifesto. Written by Alan Grant, penciled by Jean-Paul Leon, inked by Ray McCarthy, colored by Sherilyn Van Valkenburg, and then lettered by John Costanza. This is Lonnie. He's finally back at home after getting released from juvie. He's doing kid things, like using some kind of crazy machine to keep the two fused hemispheres of his brain entertained. Turns out that Lonnie is up to his old tricks, trying to find a way to spread the word of anarchy, and is mixed up with a self-proclaimed prophet of doom by the name of, oh boy, I'm going to go with Malachiah. There we go. Malachiah. Now, Lonnie finds out through Joe Potato, P.I., that's right, baby. Joe Potato P.I. That Malachiah is involved in a plot to harm the city of Gotham. Attempting to face off with Malachiah and his goons at a local phosphate plant, he gets captured. However, Batman and Robin have been wise to Malachiah for some time, with Batman arriving to try to save the day. Fighting Batman, Malachiah hits him with the power of his evil eye. So he has it's like some kind of medallion or something, but basically he's able to incapacitate.
The evil eye of Agamotto, am I right?
This guy has 4 appearances, okay? 5, I'm sorry. I'm not going to give it the evil eye of Agamotto. He knocks back. Okay, fine.
I'll do what I want.
You do what you want over there, Dean. That's fine. So he hits him with his evil eye, knocks him out, and ties all 3, Joe Potato, Anarky, and Batman, to a large blimp that is packed with explosives. As Malachiah brags to the media of a soon-to-be self-fulfilling prophecy as a preconceived disaster is about to strike Gotham, the airship heads towards its destination with its deadly payload. Luckily, Anarky is able to get free and cuts Joe and Batman loose. Trying to guide the blimp out to sea, Anarky tries to jump into the water, but his foot gets caught. Robin sees this and throws a projectile, cutting the rope just as the airship explodes, leaving us wondering, maybe Anarky didn't make it. Is Anarky still alive? We don't know. Now, throughout the second issue of this 2-issue story, we talk about the origin story that you mentioned, it's really moving, in my opinion, because what ends up happening is Lonnie's parents go to his room. They're trying to, they're worried about this kid, obviously, and they find this letter. And the letter explains what, I guess, motivated him to become who he was. He begins to learn about the hard times of his pen pal and all the strife that kid went through. He tries to find a way to address it and basically gets shut down. So then he starts going to the library and reading, which, hey, my goodness, educate yourself. And that's what this kid did. And he started to read. He started to learn. The reason why his friend was suffering was because of decisions made by governments and elites. So that clearly gave him the motivation to become Anarky. Mind you, his parents are sitting there reading this letter, and they're realizing that their son, I don't know if they realize at the end of that their son is possibly dead, because I don't even know if they know what's going on in Gotham.
He says in the letter that, like, if you're reading this, I'm probably dead.
Right.
They at least know he's gone. He's never coming back.
Right. And I will go ahead and mention this because this is just kind of like a side story. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. But and just in case somebody's like, oh, they're talking about Shadow of the Bat 40 and 41. Remember when the ex-commissioner, Jim Gordon, was possibly going to be mayor? And
what
that's
a sordid
about all
soap
that.
opera. Like his wife is now the commissioner.
Right.
I vaguely remember this, but I wasn't reading the Bat stuff every week at this point.
There's that going on. I mean, my goodness, I think we maybe get 3 or 4 pages of that at the most.
He's talking like the sleaziest political guy in all of history. It's wild.
Right. And it does not tie into the Anarky story whatsoever. Other than I think the blimp explodes, and I think Jim Gordon may see that. I don't know. But
yeah, that's what happens. That is.
Okay.
What's that? That's a big old blimp blowing up.
That's right. Don't see that too often. There you go. I mean, that is my summation of what happens in Shadow of the Bat number 40 and 41.
I think first off, they're really beautiful issues. Like I really like the way they look. They look a lot like Earth X because I think the same gentleman did both, and I really like that look. It's a good look for this. These are very somber tales. Like this is a kid. I think you're almost supposed to see Lonnie as like he's grown up now. But man, I mean, I love Lonnie, but he gets bamboozled by like lots of stuff. Like, how could you give this much money to this like Svengoolie looking motherfucker wannabe, right? Like, I mean, like, I just wouldn't do that unless he was like really funny at making riffs on film. I think this is where like part of the character, like, this like bicameral brain stuff, it's starting to be well, okay. It's the DC universe, so we're gonna pull some pseudoscience out. All in all, I think it's really fun. I think Joe Potato's amazing. The real man of the people, Joe Potato, who's just like, I never would have done this if I'd have known all these things.
Joe Potato PI with
Batman so sidelined in his own book. Batman really doesn't do a lot of these
No,
things.
he
Like
doesn't.
knocked out for most of it, being dumb and useless. I really like getting across the character in the format of the letter to his parents, who by all accounts seem to be nice people. Although his mom is like kind of stupid because he's like, look, I'm going out to play baseball. Look at this bat. Do you see that bat?
that bat.
Do you see that bat that has
right.
like an anarchy symbol like painted on it? That's like, I mean, what
To
you
each his own
where is he going to
master.
play baseball at the Thunderdome? I mean, like, I don't know, I mean, but they're good people. And all in all, it's a great way to separate Anarky from Batman so that he can go do his own thing and but to have the excuse that they think he's dead for a little bit. I really enjoyed the letter framing. I like the way it looked, other than some of the silly pseudoscience and some of the obvious descent into objectivism that's starting to happen. I mean, I don't like that stuff, but I like the two issues a lot. And it's a really good springboard for Anarky to do his own thing in the DC universe, slightly separate from Batman.
I've got to talk about, just to make a quick mention of Joe Potato and his potato puns or his potato double entendres, whatever you want to call him. I don't know what he's.
The real world's greatest detective.
I mean, I might change my profile pic to that man's face. That just might happen.
Gotham City, you should.
Right. He is the hero. Darry, you mentioned on the cusp of the internet age, and I think we're going to talk about that probably more with the next miniseries because that gets mentioned again. But, this kid is like uber smart. He's fused his hemispheres. He's got like a crazy looking virtual reality machine there, that's kind of helping him out. But he can't get out of his own way. And I think, I think the internet is mentioned in this because he's supposedly teamed up with Malakaya doing something there, spreading the word through the internet somehow. But
he's been like selling pamphlets and stuff. Somehow he's paid $5 million selling anarchist pamphlets. Buddy, ain't nobody ever made a dime selling a fucking anarchist pamphlet. Let me tell you that very, very quickly. Where do you get this $5 million or whatever?
There's a line in one of these issues, I'm not sure which one, where he very quickly says, well, I took my publishing and printing money, and then I started selling derivatives.
Right. He's like, listen, I'm the anarchist hedge fund,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I like that ultimately this kid's got to team up with Batman to stop a villain that he himself empowered, right? Like he gives the evil eye all his resources and all his chutzpah and all this other nonsense. He gives him the platform. And I think that's a good story because ultimately Lonnie has to decide, you gave this crazy person all the resources and people might get hurt. What are you going to do about it? You're going to step up and do the right thing. And he does. And I think that's important as to why he gets spun off in his own series and why, if Batman was going to die tomorrow and has to stop his top 10 greatest foes, I don't think Lonnie would be on that list. But it's good too because it's a kid screwing up. Like one of his weapons is a baseball bat and he's got a private detective that looks like he fell out of a Coen Brothers movie. Like he's a kid. He doesn't know how the world works. He has no resources other than what he just, can Google at this time. So it's funny to me to watch a kid who, is one of these, it's almost like a superhero trope. It's like, well, he can do and build whatever the story requires. So this kid has fundamentally unlimited power. What does he do with it? Oh, well, he messes up and he creates a cult that Batman then has to clean up at. So I was laughing at that. I thought that was really good. I thought that was a great way of doing things and showcasing what this character wants and why he wants it. I also appreciated Joe Potato, but more to the point, I appreciate any story that has a hot air balloon because, again,
That's fair.
yeah, this thing must have come out right around the time that Batman the Animated Series, my favorite version of Batman, had those Zeppelins in every background of every scene, at least early on.
Shit.
Yeah. So I kept picturing like, oh, that's what those are for cult leaders to tie people to them and fill them up with explosives. So, that plugged the plot hole for me. But yeah, to go back to something that Dean said, John Paul Leon, I am a huge fan of his, and I believe he passed away not too long ago. But literally, his name on comic. Yeah, no, great talent, gone too soon. But his name is one of those where I see it and I pick it up. It doesn't matter who's writing because the art's always phenomenal. He is a consummate storyteller, and for most of these 2 issues, you could read this without the dialogue. I mean, it's just super easy to follow. So, again, like Tom Lyle, just a super nice surprise to see him on art.
Another RIP, along with Norm Brayfogle, I guess. Wow, that's wild. That like these are the Integral Anarchy penciler guys too. So I hope there's not a curse. Like, I hope if they bring this guy back, like there's not something terrible because wow, it's bad. I love all their works too, and I think what Leon's work really does here is it looks kind of muddy. And that's good because these are muddy concepts. These are muddy things that are, Batman and Lonnie's philosophies going against each other. I was also going to say, like, when they discover, like, Robin's going through this stuff and he's like, the Anarchist Company or Anarcho. I wonder where I've heard that before. God damn it, Robin. Like, what the fuck? Like, where have you heard that spells anarchy with the K? It's familiar. I wonder why. You fought Eclipso with this dude, brother.
Right.
You have to remember him. The other thing is the baseball bat is a specific Easter egg.
Okay.
Because one of the tenets of anarchism is ardent anti-fascism. I have literally fist-fought fascists on the street. And we'll probably have to do so again soon, even though I'm old and don't really want to. Not because they don't deserve their faces smashed in. They absolutely do. But I'm old and I'm tired, and I hope these young people can do it, and I'll just give them some money. But the bat is often something like I've seen from the moment I got involved in anarchism, we had memes, even before there were memes. And one of them was just like, oh, I found a cure for fascism. And so you'd be like, what? And somebody would show you a baseball bat. And you also carry a baseball bat with you because, believe it or not, anarchists are not liked by law enforcement. And so, like, and you're fighting guys that law enforcement, as a general rule, sort of like. They're like Nazi racist guys. And I don't mean to denigrate too many of our law enforcement officers out there, but sadly, statistics show that we have a problem with this in our law enforcement and military. And I hope y'all get that cleaned up real soon. And so you had this, so they will pull you over. And if you have like a lead pipe or something weird, they're like, what are you doing with this? Why do you have an axe? Why do you have an axe handle? Right. That's hard to explain. If you have a baseball bat and like a glove and 2 balls, I like to play baseball, officer. There you go.
Right.
What are you gonna say? That's what I'm saying. It gives you plausible deniability in a way that another weapon might not. So that's a tip for y'all if y'all want to smash some fashion.
All right.
But don't, because that's against the law, and I don't think you should do any of those things. Okay? Legally, I highly don't want you to do it.
All right. Well, let's get into our next big 4-issue series. This is Anarky. Came out in 1997. So it hits shelves March 19th, 1997, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics. Written, of course, by Alan Grant. Penciled by Norm Brayfogle. Inked by Joseph Rubinstein. Lettered by John Costanza. And colored by Noel C. Giddings. So here we go. Anarky lives. That's right. Our first issue opens. This story gets crazy. Anarky opens.
It starts crazy and just gets crazy.
Yeah, it does. Our first issue opens with Anarky mixing it up with the Demon and also an enemy of the Demon, it looks like, by the name of Blasphemy. He summons Etrigan the Demon to help defeat Blasphemy. However, Anarky has another goal in mind. Apparently, as we see that he is using a mysterious, I don't even know if it's mysterious. I swear he says it's like quartz or something. But he's using a crystal to sap some of Etrigan's power. He's even able to use that crystal to command and hypnotize Blasphemy, this spider-looking demon. And that's kind of happens in issue 1. In issue 2, all of a sudden we're on Apocalypse. Okay. And somehow Anarky has transported himself in blasphemy there to attempt a revolution against the evil Darkseid. When Darkseid captures him, Anarky is more interested in Darkseid's motivations. But of course, there's a short battle between Darkseid and Blasphemy. Anarky is then transported back to Earth after that is over with. But he wasn't just there to talk. No. He is able to capture some of Darkseid's essence in this crystal as well. Then we get to our 3rd issue. When Batman finally gets wind of Anarky's adventures, he looks to confront him. Now, during this, Anarky captures Batman, and it is revealed that Anarky has been constructing a building. I think it's a building or an add-on to the skyscraper or something. But the purpose of it is to unleash the power of this crystal, which, like I said, not only has the madness of Etrigan, the evil of Darkseid, but it now has the good from Batman. Anarky's endgame: to de-brainwash, straight from the comic, ladies and gentlemen, de-brainwash the city and make Gotham realize things do not have to be the way that they are. Batman escapes his cuffs and a fight ensues, resulting in a shelving unit collapsing, burying Anarky and Batman. But at the end of issue 3, Anarky's hand reaches up and slams the generator switch down, activating the crystal, unleashing a wave of mind-altering energy over Gotham. In issue 4, we begin to see the effect the machine is having on Gotham. People no longer care to hide their true selves. Some are labeled enemies of the people. Bruce Wayne makes the Penguin, of all people, project coordinator for his corporation because of his criminal genius that can be used for good. Poison Ivy's helping the environment, while Mr. Freeze's brilliance is being used to help take humanity to the stars. But soon, Lonnie is made aware that the effects of this crystal are wearing off, and things are going from bad to worse in Gotham as the city seems to be destroying itself. Lonnie lets out a horrific scream and wakes up. He's been knocked unconscious since issue 3 and never activated the machine at all. He thanks Batman and escapes. And that is the end of the 4-issue Anarky series. And by golly, I did my best to put that all in a very, very long paragraph. I'm sure I left some very fun stuff out of it. Darry, you go first, buddy. What do you want to talk about here? This
is a very, very dense miniseries. I really did not know what I was getting into when I started reading this.
You're welcome.
At one point, he starts passing out the parasite tests, and we have to talk about this because this is like an incredibly specific objectivist thing. I only know this because I watch a lot of Spider-Man videos on the internet, and they're constantly like, hey, you know how Stan Lee created Spider-Man? Well, he had a friend, and that friend was crazy, so let's talk about Anne Ryan, or whatever the hell her name was. So seeing
Ditko.
Yeah, Ditko, thank you.
Stan Lee. Come on, man. We know Ditko did all the work.
Yeah, right. Well, again, I do hold a personal philosophy that if Ditko had been allowed to write Spider-Man without Stan, he would have degenerated into being the antagonist of the book. But that's
you're not wrong. I don't disagree with you. I'm giving you shit. But yeah. You can't talk about. You really can't talk about Ayn Rand objectivism in comic books without Ditko. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I thought it was funny that at one point Anarky has the parasite test and everything is checked in the affirmative, and it's kind of like, again, he's messing with the reader. He's saying, like, well, what have you done to help the person next to you recently? I thought that was very interesting. Again, I think this entire book, it's Anarchy 101, and I don't just mean that as an introduction to the concept. I mean, like, literally, like, this is something I feel like you could read in a class on the subject, which, again, very unusual for superheroes. But I love that he goes to see Darkseid, because it's one of those things where you can see Alan Grant in a 1997 coffee shop going, well, I want him to fight the ultimate evil because I want him to ask why, like you guys were saying before, like an annoying child. And I just love the way he falls ass backwards into it, where it's like, oh yeah, I built a boom tube. That's not
no big deal.
Yeah, no, I looked at the stars and I did some math and I built a boom tube.
It's honestly the only thing that saves his ass, too, because, like, for some reason, Darkseid is like, oh, I respect that, and then sends his ass back home instead of, burning his face off like he did with Blasphemy. But go ahead.
I actually really like that because if you go back to the original Kirby Fourth World books, Darkseid is not like, I'm gonna murder everyone. That was added later. The original Darkseid is like, I conquered my world. I am God of that world. I am here on Earth, and I fear none of you because I'm looking for something. I'm looking for the anti-life equation. So he was much more of a manipulator. So I thought that was good. My favorite scene in all 4 issues actually was from that issue where or they try to free the slaves, right. And then at the end they say, well, what you don't want is freedom, is you want the ability to exert the power on everyone else. And they're like, oh yeah, you're right. And then at the end of the issue, they themselves have the whip. And I thought that was the best explanation of what Lonnie's saying, which is we need to attack the underlying concept of why power is so addictive and how you can manipulate people. I thought that was a great example of that. And again, it's Darkseid and it's Apocalypse, it's myth, it's what DC does best. I really, really appreciated that. All the stuff with Etrigan and blasphemy and everything, right over my head. I was so confused. I had to read that first issue twice. I was like, oh, he's trying to get the concept of deception. He lost me. At first I thought he was like having a stroke or something. I was very, very confused by that issue.
It is strange to go from where we started in this podcast, very street level, to all of a sudden, there's the demon and he's fighting the Spider-Man guy. Now, granted, it's Etrigan versus blasphemy mostly. And then Anarky kind of shows up, like turns the tables and starts asking questions. And there's the neat part where he's falling down with the demon. And then he says, what is it? Like he says,
demon Etrigan, back form of man, something like that.
Right. Yeah. He basically, he says this series of words, and he changes him back. Is it Jason Blood? Is that his name?
Jason Blood.
Jason Blood changes him back to his normal form. But anyway,
cool as hell too.
So it's kind of like we went street level. All of a sudden, we're going into supernatural territory, which is something that I wasn't expecting at all, because this feels like this is philosophy of anarchy in some way that this character needs to try and get across. How are we going to do that with demons? But then I started to realize, there's a lot of discussion here in regards to God, and there's a lot of discussion in regards to, the beliefs of other people. So there's a reason for that. It definitely took me by surprise, but by the end of issue 1, I realized why we were there, which is good. I understand where we were going. And then all of a sudden we're on Apocalypse, and I'm like, there's a revolution brewing. And I'm like, oh, I bet Anarchy's he's the reason for this. And then sure enough, he is. But then he faces off with Darkseid. I'm like, oh man, this guy's clearly outmatched. Again, he starts to talk, and he's just trying to figure out what makes a person evil. It's cool to see that this guy, even though he believes what he believes, he's trying to understand it. And Dean, you mentioned this.
No gods, no masters is an incredibly widespread anarchist slogan. That's not to say that every anarchist doesn't believe in God. In fact, there are specific streams of anarchism: Christian anarchism, Jewish anarchism, Islamic anarchism, Zen anarchism, Buddhist anarchism, and they're wrapped around their religious beliefs. But most leftist anarchists don't believe in God. I actually do believe in God, if anybody's curious. But I keep my religious beliefs mostly to myself. They're not necessarily intertwined with my political beliefs. But so no gods, no masters it's a tenet that you at least hear, and you have to at least think about and talk about. In the DC universe, where you can just go talk to like gods, it's a lot different. Like gods are real there. Like they just are. Same in the Marvel universe. Like you can't say there's no gods. Here comes Thor. So it was really neat to see that personified, because again, this is a real world philosophy. What does it mean in a fantastical world? Well, it means that Lonnie has to literally go talk to the embodiment of all that is evil, which is Darkseid. And I really like that part too. Mostly, I love Darkseid. I'm a big Darkseid mark. But Lonnie's asking all these questions, thinking he's so smart. That's the other thing I like about this. Darkseid's like, you're here because I let you be here. He tries to leave. He's like, nah, you'll leave when I want you to leave. And then Darkseid, he also doesn't get it, where like what Darkseid says, he's like, I'm going to let you go. And he's like, oh, because you're, I can't beat you. He's like, nah. He's like, listen, I could crush you anytime I wanted, but if you're right, I'll just see you again. Because if Lonnie's right and he's going to make the whole goddamn universe hickory-doo-dah, everything's fine with everybody, then Darkseid's going to have something to say about that.
Right.
Or he's going to fail and Darkseid wins anyway. Look at what happened to the people you tried to rescue. And Darkseid's going to say, you'll never build something perfect, so I always win anyway. So I find that, that was pretty cool. And I think it's a recurring theme too, is that Lonnie, in the Shadow of the Bad issues with Malakia And these issues, he makes bad choices, and a lot of young anarchists do. I associated with people who I should not have. I let a lot of things go that I shouldn't have because I was young and excited. And you also make, like you say terrible things, like weird decisions, because it's a radical philosophy, and you want radical change probably faster than it can happen in a lot of ways. So he's doing that. He's engaging in like propaganda by the deed, which was it's like Alexander Berkman and other people around the turn of from 1800s to 1900s engaged in it. An anarchist shot McKinley. President McKinley was assassinated by a guy who believed in like propaganda by the deed. The idea being, if we just assassinate all the right powerful people, the masses will rise up and they'll just, take over everything. And it did not work, and it would never work because it just makes people very scared. But that's what he's doing. He's like, oh, I'll just have to do this. I'm going to beat it into him. I'm going to make it happen. I never went that far in my bad calls, but man, Lonnie has a lot of dumb calls, like in regard to his philosophy.
And early on at the end of the first issue, Anarky, he leaves, I think, at some point, and he finds this like monolith. I don't know where he's got this thing hidden at, but it's kind of like this large monument, I guess you'd say, that has like the numbers of people that have died for ideals and politics and religion. And he swears to fight the elites in their name. So
rich people never fight their own wars. So that's the thing. Like, we can argue that World War II probably had to be fought. At some point, like, somebody needed to do it. I don't know that it was fought for the right reasons, but Hitler had to be stopped. But World War I is just a bunch of assholes. It's just a bunch of fucking assholes who just go to kill each other for, because they said they would. That's really what it boils down to. Who was going to run Africa? Was it going to be Germany? Was it going to be Britain and France? Who was going to have the most? Who was going to be able to exploit brown people in the third world the best? Who was going to benefit economically from the post-war paradigm? That's what it was about. Like, and most wars there are very few genuine humanitarian intervention, to the point where like you can count them on one hand, like genuinely. And most of them are denigrated anyway because powerful nations aren't interested in that kind of thing. So he has like this list, like this many people died in World War I, this many people died in like Vietnam and the Indo-Chinese wars, which we usually only talk about Vietnam, but we forget that like before that they fought the French for their independence, and before that they fought the Japanese during World War II. So the Indo-Chinese wars, which would that would be the areas of Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. These went on for like literally 30 fucking years. You know what I mean? So like a lot of people died, like millions and millions. And so he's saying, and what did they die for? Honestly, nothing. They had to die so that like the people who didn't live there, who were exploiting them, had to go. So he's saying, I got to dedicate all this to this, which I respect. I don't know that brainwashing people, even though you say you're de-brainwashing them, is the way to go, Lonnie. I love you, buddy. I love you, but like you're sounding more and more like a Marxist, to be honest. Let's be honest here. This is getting very state socialism.
I'm really fascinated by Alan Grant. I have to say, I mentioned this before, but I did a little research on this guy, and he's still alive, and I guess he's still working to a degree. But it's just so funny to me. It's 1997, right? 9/11 hasn't happened yet. The Cold War is over. It's the Clinton administration, and this guy is writing Batman, and he's in this weird little area where he's writing a mainstream comic starring an anarchist talking about bringing down the entire system, and that character is the hero. And I'm constantly looking at this thing like a few years later, there's actually an entire, I don't know who was putting these together. I don't know if it's Alan Grant or someone else. Anarky has the most detailed Wikipedia pages ever.
Yeah.
They're insane.
I was just looking at that earlier.
Yeah.
It was rather large.
There's a whole, after 9/11, and also just to put this in perspective, I became an anarchist in, I would say, January of 2001. So a really great time to get into that stuff. Like people were going to be really receptive to very, very like anti-patriotic ideas very quickly, right? So yeah, like the Wikipedia page, like you're saying, Darry, they just went out of their way to disassociate themselves with the character.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I guess my point is Anarky is one of these characters where, like, if you love him, you love him, and someone out there does. I mean, it's very obvious to me. I don't know what side of the political spectrum they fall on, but there's someone out there keeping this flame alive. So it's so fascinating to me because so many characters were created in 1997, which is probably my favorite year for comics, just because I have such good nostalgia for back then. And so many characters were created back back then that we're not talking about, 25 years later. But this character, it's like, oh yeah, you actually had a plan. You had a publishing plan. You had a story. So reading this stuff is just, it's so fascinating. But I will admit to being very confused, and I think you guys have explained it now, as to what he was actually trying to accomplish, because I guess it's the plot of Liar Liar writ large, right? Like he's trying to make
it's more of that pseudoscience. I think, like, as Alan Grant got more into like the neotech thing, which honestly, I think it's a bunch of postmodern psychobabble. It's nothing. It's like this bicameral mind bullshit. The way, I don't like it, and I don't want to denigrate it too badly for the people who are into it, but it doesn't make any sense to me. But I think as he went more into that, his pseudoscience with Anarchy got bigger. And yeah, he starts that vision thing, and it's like everything becomes basically Orwell's Animal Farm. Like all of it just like dissipates. It doesn't work, and and I think he's right. I don't think you can force the masses to change that quickly. I don't think we can see those kind. And these were all you'd be good changes. I don't think you can see them quickly. And I think to address your point, Darry, there are a decent amount of people like me who like Anarchy, who are both right wing and left wing, because you can put whichever philosophy you want on him at this point. Because he's been through everything. But I think there's a larger contingent of people who like him for the reasons we've talked about. He's a guy that Batman fights. That Batman can't just be like, well, I am totally right. He can't just throw this guy in Arkham Asylum. He can't punch Lonnie so hard that the ideas that Lonnie is telling him become wrong.
Right.
You can't punch him that hard.
Yeah,
and I think that's scary. And that's why I think when you have seen him used since then, I think he's in one of like the Arkham Asylum games. And I think he's been in Arrow. He's just the guy who's into chaos. They don't try and do anything in regard to the philosophies. And that's how they're going to redefine him so they could use him. Because let's be honest, a lot of what they do now is try and make money off merchandising. And Anarchy looks good. He'd be a good action figure, look good on posters, etc. if you can get him going from some other media. But he can't be either a right-wing or a left-wing anarchist. Going in a completely different direction, we've talked a lot about Alan Grant. Norm Brayfogle is just as important to this character. He was able to make an obviously V for Vendetta-inspired character that wasn't exactly looking like him. I like the way he uses Lonnie's body language. I think that you can always tell, if Lonnie's back to you, you can tell exactly what he's thinking. I think his costume looks great, and I think Brayfogle makes him look powerful. He does a great job with the capes. I think much like he did with Batman's cape, Anarchy's big cape thing becomes a way for you to know how he's feeling. And I think that's great. I think Brayfogle, R.I.P., deserves, just as much credit as Alan Grant in many ways. And in my trade paperback, Alan Grant says so.
I want to read this to you, Darry. I want you to tell me what you think, because we kind of talked about this already. But this is the very end of this book. And Dean, you can chime in afterwards. But at the very end of this book, one of the more interesting parts of this thing is the dream sequence, which is interesting to watch how Anarchy goes to watching his vision manifest and then basically become a nightmare by the end of it, and then wakes up and he's like, oh, hey, I'm out. But yeah, we see these kids fighting, pretending to fight. And there is a little bit of some narration going on here. And I'll read this. It says, the information age provides a spotlight the parasites can't squirm away from. Remember, this is 1997, folks. Identify them. Negate their evil. Ostracize them. Step with me into a better world. So, Darry, what'd you think of those words as we finished out this series?
It's oddly prophetic considering what we would end up using the internet for, but it's also this weird utopianism. It's like people take this thing they don't particularly understand. They know it's going to be important and they put it on this pedestal. And it's like you're sitting here saying, well, once we can all talk to each other the world over, most of our problems are going to go away. And it's like, yeah, it didn't happen, guys. That absolutely didn't happen. We got more tools. And since we're complicated apes, we use those tools to build new things, most of which you can't even imagine in 97. I certainly could have, though I was a dumb kid, so I don't know. But that's what I'm talking about here. These are not dumb stories. They're not your standard fare, but Grant knew what we were getting into. I said this to you guys in our group chat, but Lonnie is the type of character that could only exist before Reddit, because if a super intelligent kid who could create a holographic projector in his middle-class parents' basement was around, he would be a Reddit moderator. He'd be doing anti-work or crypto or something. He wouldn't he wouldn't be fighting the Batman. He'd be leading a cult and telling people and having YouTube videos with billions of views. Like he would have found his place, and it wouldn't have been running around in a costume that looks like the Spanish Inquisition. So yeah, I love that quote. I love this whole thing because again, it's prophetic. Like, why does Anarky feel so weird? Because it was 5 years early. It was just like it was too early. Like if Grant had kept this in his back pocket and tried to publish this after 9/11, this could have come out at Image or Dark Horse, but DC and Marvel wouldn't have touched it. And it could have been a really interesting story like that. But because of the time it came out, and he's in Gotham City and he's fighting Batman. And there's something great about that because he gets to tell a real story, it's not just content. There's a real story buried there. And I really appreciated that about it.
Well, I think that Anarky really sums it up very well at one point where he's just like, in the near future, very soon, and this is something Noam Chomsky says as well, another prominent anarchist, the one that probably everybody knows, that you kind of know that name. He's actually, this name gets dropped in Spider-Man a decent amount for some reason. But like in the very near future, everybody's going to think like this, or there just won't be people to think about it. We're on the verge in the real world of like utter ecological collapse. We're closer to nuclear apocalypse than ever. We're closer to imminent, authoritarian structures like we've never seen since World War II in the so-called First World right now. And I think that Lonnie was right in the DC universe, and he's right here. I think that in the DC universe, no, I don't think Lonnie, he would also be a Reddit moderator. But the cool thing about superhero comics is that somehow the personification of fear and the personification of like speed, I think he said this, they can fight and it will mean something. And here, like Darry said, this is a fight that means something. There's a real story here, and you can't it's not just like Daredevil doesn't want to kill this guy, the Punisher does. There's much more like, because at the end of the day, though, both Punisher and Daredevil agree this guy's a piece of shit. He either needs to go to prison or get shot. Neither in our country are particularly great, particularly considering our healthcare system. I don't know what you'd argue for. But Batman and Anarky disagree. Anarky and Robin disagree, and no amount of punching can solve the problem, but a certain amount of punching is still fun to see. I think that the 4 issues are really good. I think they allow you to see a lot of, if it's not outright anarchist philosophy, it's certainly anti-authoritarian ideology, which is, usually good, usually leads people down the right path. And the most important thing, and I tell this people all the time, I don't necessarily want you to agree with. I do, but like I'm not necessarily sitting here like, oh, we're gonna have 3 conversations, and then you're gonna be out reading fucking David Graeber and Andrei Shkrubashevsk, and you'll have a red and black flag on your car. It's not what it is. Maybe when I was closer to Lonnie's age, like he was, maybe I did think so. But now I just want you to think about things, and I think that's where Lonnie winds up. He wants you to ask questions. He just doesn't want you, whatever somebody is saying. In particular, people who have authority over you, don't just take their word for it. Ask questions. And if you find that the authority is demeaning or oppressive to you, do your best to overthrow it, or at least fuck it over as much as you can. And I think that's what you get out of these 4 issues. I think that I always love seeing the Demon, always love seeing Darkseid. I think it's fun that Batman in almost every one of these Anarchy stories just looks like a wuss. It's really peculiar. But like even here, he doesn't do a whole lot. And even after, like, he just gets away, Anarchy's like, until everybody's free, Batman, and he's got his dog.
He's got his dog in his arm.
Yeah. Listen, and the dog's a real star. I love Yap. What a great guy. I love when the dog like activates the security system. He's like, oh shit, we gotta get out of here. So no, it's whether you like the philosophy or not, whether you like that stuff, this is going to be good for you to read because it is a villain. It is not a villain or a hero or even an anti-hero in the DC universe. It is true. Anarky is truly just like the Skeletons with David S. Pumpkin, its own thing.
You know who the real victim is in this entire story, or victims rather? Lonnie's poor parents.
Oh,
right? They're doing their best, their best, not the best, but their best. They're trying to connect with their kid. Then they think he's dead, and then he's in juvie. And then if you keep reading his ongoing series, it turns out they're not even his parents. But it's like, Alan, you need to hug your mom more or something. Because Jesus, I feel really bad for these two. Like, not even that they don't have a relationship with their kid. That's obvious to me that wasn't going to happen. But it's like, wow, he just is like, I hate you, Mom and Dad. dad for always being supportive and not liking my VR system as much as I did. It's just,
hey, I need
bad,
to ease up out of that VR system. Mom, what are you doing?
Yeah. It's like when we were growing up and like you're playing Nintendo and you're like, hey, clean your room. Like, I can't, like, you pause your game. You know, it's like, no, I want to pause the game. You know? Yes, but I don't necessarily know that they're treated poorly, but they're not really characters in some ways. You know, I mean, they're there so that Lonnie can make someone sad, so you can remember that, like, he's a human of sorts. But I do feel bad for them. I do think that I think, like you said, they do their best. It's just, you know, it was never going to work between them, especially Alan Grant. Actually, after this guy didn't get to be Robin, Anarky was intended to be like the Joker's kid, which also I think got done away with. So, you know, the parents, I guess, at some point, I don't know that it was originally intended, but once that was the idea, they're just a vehicle. And, you know, that's sad because I don't think they're bad parents to what we read at all.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think Lonnie's a bad kid either, but he is a little shit. Let's be honest.
Well, he's a derivative trader, you know, and if never.
I swear to God, I got to find out how he made that money off anarchist pamphlets because I have a lot, like, and I would sell them. You know, as much as I'm an anti-capitalist, I will take $5 million.
Black market. Right. All right, well, let's go ahead. We'll get into plugs. I don't know. Dean, you sent us like a list of 15, and I just had a chance to look at that yesterday. Any idea what we're going to cover next? Did we have a plan?
G.I. Joe Extreme.
That's right. G.I. Joe Extreme. Oh, boy. Should be a lot of fun to talk about that.
G.I. Joe Extreme. Like, that's how it is.
Joe Extreme.
Is that how it goes?
Yeah, like they had a cartoon. That's the bumper. That's all I remember from it. I remember watching it. Not enjoying it, but I'm interested to see the comic book version of it, especially with Mike W. Barr writing, who, in my opinion, he's a 3 results comic book writer. He hits a home run, he walks, or he strikes out.
Yeah, do yourself a favor and watch the theme song. It's such a product of its time that it's amazing. It's more amazing than the show it was connected to. The theme song is just one of those, like, wow, someone made this thing and they just went home. They didn't even stick around for the show. They just went home.
They went home on a skateboard wearing their Technicolor shirt.
Yeah. That song was composed by Poochie from The Simpsons before he left to go home to his home planet.
The funniest thing about G.I. Joe Extreme, too, is they're like, this is G.I. Joe for a new generation. It's extreme. Also, here's our Captain America ripoff.
Yeah.
So if that's the plan, that's what we're going to be covering next. This would be a good time to plug a sponsor of the W2M network, and that is Grammarly. For you, the listeners of Unspoken Issues, Grammarly is offering a free download of the Grammarly software. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M network to download Grammarly for free. Well, Dean Compton can tell me about the Unspoken Decade. I know he can. Tell me about it, Dean.
Yeah, and this is a special episode, so I also encourage everyone who wants to know more about Anarky, because we can't get into it here, look up the Anarky FAQ. It's incredibly comprehensive. It will tell you all about the different forms of anarchy, from anarcho-feminism, Christian anarchy, anarcho-communism, anarcho-syndicalism, anarchy without adjectives, etc., anarcho-queerism. So there's really something for everybody to kind of get into these anti-authoritarian ideas. Look that up. You just have to Google Anarky FAQ. I think it's also at anarchyfaq.net. I do not have any anarchist files at the unspokendecade.com, but there's plenty of things for you to read and listen to there. We're on Facebook, and that's where SemiFan takes care of a lot of great stuff. On Twitter at Unspoken Decade. It is baseball season now, though, so I spend a lot of time watching Royals games. Twitter's not going to be as active as it used to be, unless you want to talk about Royals games, in which case hit me up.
All right. Me and Chris Armstrong sat down and talked about the new costume that Daredevil busted out. We also talked about Extreme Justice number 0. That may be even in the archive as well, right here on the Source Material Comics feed. And as for myself, my own show, Source Material Comics Podcast, we're doing something for the Superblog Team Up image related, I believe, and I'm still trying to come up with what I'm going to do there. But by golly, it may be in the feed. So check that out. I think that is going to be it. We are going to call it a night for Dean Compton, for Darry Waite. I am Jesse Starcher. Thanks for hanging out with us this evening. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us. Unspoken Issues is part of the UnspokenDecade.com, the home for 90s comics, blogs, and podcasts. Unspoken Issues also has a Facebook group you can join if you are interested. Just search the Unspoken Issues podcast and request to join. All of this would not be possible without W2Mnet.com and the Rattlich and Broadcasting Network, so make sure to seek them out for more podcasts. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to share, and we look forward to entertaining you again soon.